Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. It's been a few days since my last video. I had a very busy week at work, and nevertheless I did manage to fish for some really cool insights, and I found one that I wanted to share with you in this video. Before I get started, for those of you who live in Amsterdam, there's an event coming June 15th in the late afternoon and evening with meditation, energetic healing, and blue lotus tea, which is a very nice tea being brought by a partner in crime of mine with whom we're going to conduct the event. So the link will be in the description, and it will be cool to see some of you guys there. There's still a couple of spots left. As to the topic of today's video, during a meditation yesterday, something arose for the first time, and it made a very clear mark as an insight, and the word trust came up along with it, along with that insight. Trust is a factor that is, in essence, what we are trying to get to. And I've seen it mentioned in some other videos before by other people in YouTube who talk about this profound trust in life, right? So to learning to have this deep sense of trust in life. And it's something that we fundamentally lack when we are identified with our egoic sense of self. You could say that the egoic sense of self, I've made many claims about the fact that it's essentially a fear-based and defense mechanism. So one way to describe it would be to call it lack of trust in life. This impetus or willful energy that believes that it knows better and that it can do better, and that it can improve the conditions of life that are taking place at any given point in time, and that it needs to depart away from those for things to be okay. Now, it is true to say that we want to have develop this deep trust in life. Yeah. And yet, what I rarely hear being mentioned is how we develop it proper. Very often we'll hear that we simply need to exercise that trust, that it is something that we ought to show as we deal with people and situations and so on. And I have a serious problem with that. And in fact, yesterday that was confirmed, because the way that trust arose in my meditation was after having, for an extended period of time, engaged into touching the parts of my neurology that are in charge of survival and generating discomfort and fear, after having connected with those parts of myself or of my system for a very long period of time, there came a point where there was a kind of handshake taking place with that circuitry. And the circuitry of fear was permeated or completely penetrated with awareness or by awareness, to the point where they became a single system, not awareness or the part of the mind that observes over here and the part of mind that fears over here, and one watching the other, but it became a single thing. And the moment that happened, and those two subsystems, if you will, I'm speaking very technical here on purpose, as a matter of fact. I want to demystify this whole grace and trust. No, it's when two modules or systems of our nervous system or subsystems of our nervous system become fully acquainted with each other, only then can they trust one another. only then does non-duality arise, and only then does this deep handshake and this deep trust can be then felt on a psychological level. And it goes back to something that I've always tried to emphasize, and it's the notion that you cannot do the outcomes of this process. You cannot say, well, from here on, I will try to be more trusting. Good luck with that. Life will poke at you. It'll test the degree to which you can do that, and you will succumb when enough stresses from the environment are pushing on you. It won't work. It simply won't. It also teaches us to continuously work on the primary causes or the fundamentals that result in that trust arising as a natural consequence. I was asked by some people who got the embodiment course, which is also available in the link, by the way, whether embodiment led to self-realization. In other words, if you do body scans, if you do Tai Chi or yoga or these kind of things, do you eventually become self-realized? Do you awaken? And the answer to that is yes and no. I had not made this distinction in the past, but the fact of the matter is that you could do embodiment of your peripherals until the cows come home. You could feel your arms, you could feel your legs, you could feel your chest, you could feel this, that, and the other. You could try to kind of feel your heart, and your solar plexus and those things. And that creates a great container. And it creates a lot of wholesome interconnections with your body, right? So that's a major part of embodiment. But the central channel and the fear circuitry in your throat, heart, and the pit of your stomach, you cannot come at those from the outside. You can only come at those from within, doing self-inquiry. By asking questions such as, what do I mean when I say I? Or what is this sense, what is at its core my sense of self? That creates a kind of introspective point towards that circuitry, which poses as you. Your sense of self is that circuitry manifesting as psychology. So you need to come at it in a completely different way that when you embody by feeling your arms and legs and doing yoga asana or tai chi chuan or whatever you want to call it, right? It's a deeper, it's still embodiment, it's still connecting things or connecting circuitry, but it's done in a different way because that piece of your circuitry, or what is called is sort of like an endo nervous system as opposed to an exo nervous system or a peripheral nervous system. They are two different parts or two different circuitries. So, but it's still embodiment. It's just done in a different way, and it's still trying to connect you to parts of your psychosomatics that don't know each other. Now, here's another question that I got, which was how to become more engaged with the world and more harmonious in our relationships, and how would embodiment help with that? And the reason embodiment helps with that, both of the peripheral embodiment, but mostly the sort of inner channel, central channel embodiment, the reason is you're never really fighting with people. You're never really fighting with circumstances. Circumstances or peripheral perceptions are never the ones stressing you. The fight is going on between your sense of self or your mind's ability to perceive and things that it has not been able to perceive, or things away from which it disconnected itself as a defense. So going back to how ego starts and how our nervous system develops, there are emotional and physical affects that we are incapable of feeling when we are very, very young. So our mind creates a rift, it creates a disconnect to protect us from everything that is going on here. And from there on out, there's a contentious relationship between our thinking mind and our fear circuitry. They don't like one another. Especially the thinking mind doesn't trust the fear circuitry. To the thinking mind and your egoic sense of self, the fear circuitry and all visceral sensations are icky, untrustworthy monsters lurking underneath that ought not to be seen, and we ought to distract ourselves away from them or seek pleasure. We ought to sometimes we seek discomfort. We seek physical and psychological discomfort just so that we don't have to feel these visceral emissaries that come with messages that threaten to destroy our lives or overwhelm us or wipe us out, right? Make us go psychotic or make us give up or whatever. So the thinking mind doesn't know how to surrender to these feelings. It's part of the thinking mind's programming not to surrender. The thinking mind is the opposite of surrender, the opposite of trust. So if we want to create a connection between the thinking mind and the fear circuitry, we must use equanimous observation or detached observation as a third party that can observe both of them at the same time and eventually create a bridge between the two. That's what they say, that you can't do anything about getting enlightened. Well, that's kind of true, because the doing and the you are both egoic, but that doesn't mean that there's not something to be done, right? The use of awareness for integrative purposes, as opposed to using our awareness to disengage or detach or go into thinking loops in order to avoid these painful affects that need to bring their information forth. And in our willingness to enter on discomfort or uncomfortable spaces, we start to then connect back and make reconnections into all that fear circuitry. If we do this enough, it goes from being super scary to simply being uncomfortable, and then it goes from being uncomfortable to being incredibly pleasurable. The amount of pleasure that comes from those centers once they are pacified and reconnected with is enormous, and the level of peace that one experiences when these fear centers and the thinking and emoting that comes with them is set to zero is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a complete trust that whatever is happening, quote unquote, outside and inside is all to be just simply 100% completely allowed, because it is doing exactly what it needs to do. And our opinion only gets in the way of that process being harmonious. That doesn't mean that our opinion is useless. It doesn't mean that the thinking mind is evil. It just means that as an isolated module, it doesn't really know what to do. Its opinions are completely misguided by a lack of connection with other parts that are more in tune with the environment and in complete harmony with what's going on. And also trying to heal themselves on a constant basis by doing what feels like stressing you out or causing you pain. I did a video in the past called something along the lines of anxiety is trying to heal you. So if you're interested in deepening your understanding of this topic, you may want to have a look at that one. And that is essentially today's video, is this notion that in feeling fear in a dispassionate and constant way and allowing it to do its job, allowing it to come up, to express itself, and to really plunge into it with an investigative awareness that eventually integrates the fear circuitry. And what it creates is a deep sense of trust that our body knows exactly what it's doing, and we should allow it to do what it needs to do. And that deep sense of trust spills over into so trust of our body and its uncomfortable affects or sensations or doing what it needs to do spills over into trust for life. It cannot be done the other way around. It's an impossible move, because the affects that we're afraid of will hold us back and will hold us hostage so long as we're not willing to feel them in full and trust that they are doing exactly what they need to do, despite what the thinking mind and our protective sense of self believes or tells us should be happening. As usual, I'm very curious to hear your take on the topic, and if you believe that these videos are helpful or might be helpful to others, then your liking, sharing, and subscribing makes the channel ever more visible, and it's also super motivating to me to keep doing this. I'll be back with more videos pretty soon, and until then, thanks for listening. Cheerio, and bye-bye.